Three male students blocked the path of a black girl in the parking lot and began to bully her. But just a few minutes later, all of them were lying on the ground, aching and stunned. They had no idea she had been secretly training in Krav Maga Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai for the past 2 years, just so she would never be broken again. Before we dive into the story, if you believe that strength doesn't just lie in fists, but in the ability to uphold dignity amidst insults, then this story is for you. Help this channel reach its first 1,000 subscribers by hitting like and subscribing. Just a simple click, but it's a powerful source of energy that helps us continue telling inspiring stories where justice doesn't wear a cape but takes the form of those who seem invisible. And now let's return to the story where a black girl who was once bullied in silence made the entire school take a hard look at itself. Edison High School, Georgia, 7:45 a.m. Every morning on the third-floor hallway of Edison High felt like an unofficial parade. The clattering of sneakers, the giggles from the cheerleader group, and the shouting of the basketball boys made the place buzz like a never-ending beehive. But among all that noise, there was one girl no one noticed. Her name was Aaliyah Brooks. The 16-year-old black girl moved like a shadow head, down backpack clutched to her chest. Earbuds always in but never playing music, just an excuse not to talk. A gray hoodie hid almost all of her neatly coiled curls, leaving only her eyes visible, dark brown and quiet, always avoiding contact. Aaliyah wasn't the top student nor the worst. Not dazzling like the blonde-haired popular girls, nor quirky enough to be the interesting weirdo. She simply didn't exist in anyone's eyes. And she had learned how to live that way for nearly 2 years. Ever since she moved from Chicago after a family incident she had never shared with anyone. Until that morning. She had just passed the last row of lockers when she heard a laugh she'd grown familiar with. Drew Connors, a senior captain of the football team, the kind of person everyone knew, but no one dared cross. Behind him trailed 3 other guys, like the extended tail of his bloated ego. They laughed, slapped each other on the back, and looked at Aaliyah like they'd just discovered a new toy to mess with. Drew whispered something to Marcus, the shortest of the group, but always the instigator. They glanced back just as Aaliyah tried to slip by. "Hey, Black Barbie," Marcus said loudly, his voice laced with mockery. Aaliyah froze, her heart pounding, but she said nothing. She turned away, walking faster. "She's ignoring us," Drew laughed. "I like the quiet ones. Bet she's super zen in yoga class." The group's laughter echoed down the hallway. A few students glanced over, then quickly looked away. No one said a word. She managed 3 more steps. Then came the fast footsteps. Smack! The sound of the slap cracked through the noisy hallway like a whip. Aaliyah staggered, her left cheek burned. The hallway went dead silent. All eyes turned to her and Drew, the one who had slapped her without hesitation. "What, just teaching manners," he said coldly. "You think you're something special. You invisible little black girl." Aaliyah stood still, gently touching her cheek. No tears, no screams, but something in her eyes had shifted. She turned around, her dark brown eyes now carried a glint that made Drew pause for half a second. There were no tears in that look, no fear, just silence. "And danger. You shouldn't have done that," she said slowly. Her voice was calm, low, but it rang like a bell in the frozen air. "Oh yeah," Drew sneered, swinging his arm again. But before his hand could land a second time, his body flipped over. Everything happened too fast. His right arm was caught. She pivoted, pulled him down hard, then crack! The sound of a bone snapping echoed down the hallway. Drew screamed like a wounded animal. The hallway erupted, screams, camera clicks, shouts of "Oh my God" everywhere. Aaliyah stood still, not stepping back. Her eyes locked forward, her arms relaxed, but her stance ready. Marcus started to charge at her, but froze when she glanced his way. It was the kind of look that said, "Do you want to be next?" Mrs. Monroe, the 11th grade chemistry teacher, came rushing in, shouting as she pushed students aside. She yelled, "Aaliyah, step back! Drew, are you okay?" He wasn't okay, clutching his arm, screaming like a slaughtered bull. But Aaliyah turned and calmly walked away from the crowd. She didn't look at anyone. She said nothing more. Every eye followed her, shocked, afraid, and just a little in awe. The third-floor hallway of Edison High was no longer its usual buzz of noise. No laughter, no crowds gathered around lockers. Even the class bells sounded strangely muted. It was as if every student was waiting for something or someone, and that someone was Aaliyah Brooks. The black girl walked quietly down the empty hallway, her rubber-soled sneakers tapping lightly on the tiled floor. No one stopped her, and no one dared come near. Eyes peeked secretly through classroom door windows, through the glass panels behind half-closed blinds. She didn't need to look back. Aaliyah knew they were all talking about her. Her hand was still numb, as if it could still remember the feeling of snapping Drew Connor's elbow, the boy who used to be untouchable at this school. Principal's office, 8:32 a.m. The old mahogany door stood slightly ajar. Office assistant Ms. Daniels waited outside, her eyes uneasy but saying nothing. Aaliyah stepped in, nodding slightly, but not smiling. Principal Elizabeth Monroe, a stern woman with prematurely silver hair, sat behind a large oak desk. She said nothing at first. In the corner of the room sat Drew, his arm in a cast and sling face, pale eyes red from either crying or rage. His parents, Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Claire Connors, were both present, wearing expressions of cold wealth and furious indignation. "Take a seat, Aaliyah." Principal Monroe's voice was soft but firm. Aaliyah pulled out a chair and sat, her hands resting neatly on her lap, eyes forward. Not afraid, not tense, but clearly not avoiding anything. Mrs. Claire leaned forward, voice tense. "She should be expelled immediately. My son is seriously injured. His arm, it's broken. Who gave her the right to do that in a school?" Mr. Thomas slammed his hand on the desk. "We're going to sue. If this school doesn't take serious action, prepare to face us in court." Principal Monroe raised her hand to silence them. She turned her gaze to Aaliyah. "Do you have anything to say about what happened this morning?" Aaliyah took a slow breath. She didn't look away from the principal's eyes. "He slapped me first." Her voice was steady, without bitterness or fear. Mrs. Claire shot up. "What lies? Drew has never hit anyone in his life." Drew mumbled, "She's lying. I didn't. I was just messing around." Aaliyah tilted her head. She knew where the truth stood, and for the first time her voice rose slightly. "There were at least 30 students there. There's a security camera. They all saw it." The room froze for a few seconds. Principal Monroe nodded. "We're reviewing the footage, and we've taken statements from 3 other students. They confirmed Drew used violence first." Mrs. Claire opened her mouth to object, but Mr. Thomas raised his hand to stop her. He was thinking. Things weren't as simple as he had assumed. "And your reaction?" Principal Monroe turned to Aaliyah. "Do you understand that your move could cause Drew to permanently lose function in his arm?" Aaliyah paused for a second, then responded directly, "I didn't mean to. I was defending myself." Outside the office, more and more students were gathering. Rumors spread fast. Aaliyah's facing off with the Connors family. Some were secretly live-streaming, others just crowding closer, hoping to hear something. Inside, the tension grew thick. Principal Monroe emphasized, "Even if it was self-defense, your actions were serious. The school cannot overlook this. You will receive an official warning and be placed under special monitoring. If there's another violent incident, you'll be suspended immediately." Aaliyah nodded. She said nothing more. Drew kept his head down. His casted hand trembled slightly. Maybe for the first time in his life, he knew what it felt like to lose. And not just lose, but be humiliated. Leaving the principal's office, 9:12 a.m. As soon as Aaliyah stepped out, the crowd of students parted like the sea. No one dared laugh, no one dared ask anything, but their eyes said it all: surprise, confusion, and admiration. Step by step, Aaliyah walked down the hallway like a warrior returning from battle, but she didn't lift her chin. She didn't smile with pride, because in her heart, this wasn't a victory. In the old wooden house at the end of Maple Street, 6:43 p.m. that same day, Aaliyah sat in her room, the soft yellow desk light casting a glow on her quiet face. Her mother, Naomi Brooks, a night shift nurse, was getting ready for work. As she slung her bag over her shoulder, she asked, "Another fight?" Aaliyah didn't answer right away. She quietly brushed her hair, then looked at her mother. "I was just defending myself." Naomi paused for a second, then sighed. No scolding, no blame, just fatigue. She placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Don't let your silence turn into anger. Turn it into strength, but not strength to strike back. Strength to stand your ground." Aaliyah nodded softly. That night, her phone lit up, a text from an unknown number. "You did the right thing. I should have spoken up before, but I was scared. L." Then a second message followed. "They used to beat me up too. If you need a witness, I'll speak." Aaliyah stared at the screen. She didn't know who L was, but it didn't matter. She understood one thing. The truth was beginning to surface. 2 days after the hallway incident, Edison High had yet to return to normal. Messages spread like wildfire from the video showing Aaliyah snapping Drew's arm to the wild rumors that she was a secret MMA fighter trained in the military or had learned inner force from a monastery in Nepal. Part curiosity, part unspoken fear, students across campus now looked at Aaliyah as if she were some kind of extraordinary creature. But for Aaliyah Brooks, those whispers felt like blades slicing open old scars. Wednesday, 4:57 p.m., the school was nearly empty when Aaliyah walked out of after-school biology tutoring. She didn't like staying late, especially with rain coming, but today she wanted quiet. Wearing headphones, she walked briskly toward the back parking lot, usually deserted at this hour. But as soon as she stepped onto the wide concrete space, she immediately sensed something wrong. A breeze swept by. No birds, no cars, only footsteps. 3 of them. Aaliyah stopped. Her headphones were still in, but the music had long since gone silent. She slowly turned around. Jake Sanders, Drew's right-hand man, stood about 20 feet away. With him were Eli and Connor, the other 2 from Drew's trusted crew. They wore dark hoodies, caps pulled low, their expressions grim. Jake sneered, "Heard you like breaking people's arms." Aaliyah didn't respond. She quietly removed her headphones, coiled them, and tucked them into her pocket. Eli stepped forward, voice hoarse. "Drew's at home in a cast. He told us to deliver a message." "Who do you think you are?" Connor squinted. "Or maybe you want round 2. In Aaliyah's mind, every sense kicked into high alert. Her breath slowed, her hands relaxed. Her eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. No people, no cars. Just brick walls, fencing, and 3 boys advancing with vengeance in their eyes. "Walk away," she said softly. "I don't want more trouble." Jake laughed like it was a joke. He stepped forward and threw a punch without warning. First mistake. Aaliyah dodged, grabbed his wrist, pivoted, and twisted his shoulder downward to the ground. Jake howled before he even understood what happened, but Eli lunged in, aiming a punch straight at her head. Second mistake. She blocked it with her shoulder, stepped back, then twisted her hips and unleashed a kick like a hammer to Eli's stomach. He stumbled back, coughing hard. Connor tried rushing her from behind, but Aaliyah had already turned, dropped her center of gravity, and swept his legs out from under him. 3 seconds, 3 boys, all down, gasping for breath. Aaliyah stood tall, face emotionless, breath steady. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the surge of adrenaline coursing through her. Jake crawled to his knees, his face burning red with humiliation. "What the hell are you?" "A monster," he hissed. "No," Aaliyah replied, eyes locked on his. "I'm someone who used to be like you, and I won't let anyone do that to me again." She turned and walked away. No one stood in her path. Later that afternoon, 6 to 12 p.m., Aaliyah's phone buzzed. A message from another unknown number. I saw what you did in the lot. Thank you. You don't realize it, but you're helping more people than you think. Immediately after, another message appeared, this time from Drew Connors. They acted stupid. I didn't tell them to do that. I'll clear it up. Aaliyah stared at the message. Part of her felt relieved, but another part was more cautious than ever. The next morning in journalism class, Mia, a bright-eyed girl with light curly hair, editor of the school paper, approached Aaliyah's desk, eyes gleaming. You know you're turning into a hero, right? Mia said. They used to bully the younger grades. Now no one dares whisper. Aaliyah shook her head. I don't want to be some fight legend. No, Mia smiled. You're becoming a symbol for those who are bullied, that they can rise. Not to hit back, but to stop being afraid. That sentence made Aaliyah pause her pen. Her heart twitched because it hit the very wound she'd been hiding all along. Later that day, breaking news. A new video of the parking lot scene spread like wildfire. No one knew who filmed it, but it was crystal clear. 3 boys attacking and a black girl effortlessly taking them down. Social media lit up with comments. Ghost girl comeback, she's real-life Wonder Woman. Can't believe she goes to our school. Why do we wait to get hit before we fight back? What are we teaching our students? But among the hundreds of comments, one stood out to Aaliyah. From an anonymous account, I was hit by Drew. Pushed into a wall by Jake. I never told anyone, but now I will speak. Aaliyah stared at the screen. A faint smile appeared on her lips. That message from the anonymous account didn't just occupy Aaliyah's mind all afternoon. It triggered a wave of confessions from students who until now had seemed like the most well-behaved at Edison High. In less than 24 hours after the incident in the parking lot, the anonymous inbox of the school newspaper managed by Mia received over 20 emails. Their content stories of school violence, emotional bullying, racial taunting, body shaming, and one familiar name appeared over and over again. Drew Connors, Friday Edison High School newsroom, 12:40 p.m. Are you sure we should go public with this? Aaliyah asked, eyes fixed on the laptop screen where Mia was compiling all the accusations. Mia chewed on her pen, clearly tense. I'm not planning to name every person. But I think if someone like you had the courage to stand up, then the people who were silenced deserve to be heard. Aaliyah stayed silent. Before transferring to Edison, she had never believed in the idea of collective voice. Back in Chicago, where she used to live, everything happened in the dark. Silence meant survival. Speaking out usually meant trouble. But here, things were different. There's one entry like this. Mia opened an email. A girl named Haley, 10th grade, wrote, Drew once locked me in the gym storage room. I cried through an entire class period, but never dared tell anyone. After seeing Aaliyah stand up, I realized I also have the right not to stay silent. A tightness seized Aaliyah's chest, not out of pain, but responsibility. That afternoon, principal's office, Aaliyah was summoned again, but this time not for fighting. Principal Monroe sat behind her desk holding a stack of printed pages, emails from the newspaper's inbox. Beside her was Mr. Allen, the school's guidance counselor. Are you aware of these letters? Monroe asked. Aaliyah nodded slightly. Mia told me. Did you write anything in them? She shook her head. No, I think I already spoke with my actions. Mr. Allen interjected. That's exactly why you're becoming a symbol of what they're calling silent strength. But Aaliyah, every symbol carries weight. Are you sure you're okay? Aaliyah sat still, eyes sharpening. Neither of them knew that every night when the small house she shared with her mother sank into darkness, Aaliyah still woke up startled by the imagined sound of knocking, the heavy footsteps of a drunken man from years past, still echoing in her mind. She took a slow breath, then replied, I've lived with pressure far worse than this, but at least this time I'm not afraid. Saturday, Central Park, 3:00 p.m. Mia suggested a small gathering for those who had once stayed silent. The location was a small park near the school, with an old stone bench and a line of trees already shedding leaves early. At first, only 4 people showed up, then 7, then 15. By 4 p.m., nearly 30 students were sitting in a circle or leaning against trees, silent, listening as one by one began to speak. A boy talked about being locked inside a locker for 3 days just because he saved his lunch for his younger sister. A girl recounted how she received inappropriate photos from an anonymous group of boys online and how she was threatened if she dared to tell a teacher. And then someone turned to Aaliyah. "What about you? What happened to you?" someone asked. Silence fell. Aaliyah inhaled deeply. She stood up, hands clasped lightly. "I used to live in an apartment where every time the door opened I had to guess whether that night he would smash things, yell, or hit me first." No one spoke. Some eyes blinked rapidly. "I learned to read moods by the sound of footsteps. I learned to dodge blows by curling under tables. I learned to survive while my mother trembled and he drank." She looked up, meeting each breathless face. "And I also learned to fight back. Not to win, but to survive." After the gathering, a short video secretly recorded by Mia was posted on the school paper's official X page. In the clip, Aaliyah stood in front of the student circle, her voice low and steady, her gaze unwavering. The video gained over 50,000 views in 24 hours, shared widely both inside and outside Edison's community. Even teachers from other schools commented, "A student like that deserves an award, not punishment. We need more voices like Aaliyah's. Why does a student have to learn martial arts just to survive school?" That last question echoed in Aaliyah's mind all evening, but the storm wasn't over yet. An anonymous email was sent to every student and teacher in the school at 11:04 p.m. that night. Attached was a photo of an old hospital record from Aaliyah's time in Chicago, with the headline, "Here's your hero, the girl once placed in protective custody for domestic violence." Aaliyah froze in front of her screen. The ghost of her past had returned. Sunday, 11:05 p.m. In the small room where yellow light cast shadows on walls, covered with pictures of trees and quotes about courage, Aaliyah sat motionless. The phone screen on her hand still glowed. That email was still there, unerasable, undeniable. A fragment of her past she had always wanted to bury had been dug up and thrown into the light in the cruelest way. A photo of her hospital records from Chicago was attached under a provocative headline, "Someone once held in protective custody by social services. Someone flagged for violent response tendencies. This is who you're all praising." It had been sent from an anonymous address. No one knew who sent it. But the tone was all too familiar, arrogant, venomous. Aaliyah knew exactly. Only a few people had enough motive to do something like that. She didn't cry, didn't shake, but inside there was a hollow coldness, not because she'd been exposed, but because no one cared to understand. Monday morning, 7:32 a.m. As Aaliyah entered school, she could feel the stares. It was no longer the pure admiration from days before. Now it was a mix, curiosity, suspicion, and avoidance. A group of students gossiped near the lockers. "I heard she was held in a juvenile center. Didn't her stepdad get arrested? She learned martial arts because she once attacked an adult at home." No one said it to her face, but they didn't need to. Whispers are always the loudest for someone who's already been hurt. Math class, 8:15 a.m. Mia walked into the classroom, locked eyes with Aaliyah, then immediately slipped into the seat beside her. She pulled out her phone, leaned over. "I know you've seen it." Aaliyah didn't respond. Mia continued, "I'm tracing the IP address. If it's a Gmail account, I might be able to find the source. I think it's someone from Jake's group." Aaliyah kept her eyes fixed on the whiteboard ahead. "I'm not afraid of your past," Mia whispered. "I'm afraid they'll use it against you instead of trying to understand why it exists." Aaliyah finally turned to her. speaking for the first time that morning, her voice hoarse. I survived just to avoid being hit. I never thought surviving would become a sin. Lunchtime, Edison cafeteria. 12:05 p.m. No one sat next to Aaliyah. Even the small group of kids who had recently asked to take pictures with her now walked by, pretending not to see. A few even smirked at the sight of her sitting alone, earbuds barely in. Mia stormed in, slammed her tray down, and snapped, "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. They treat anonymous leaks like absolute truth, but ignore the story from the actual person involved." Aaliyah still hadn't touched her food. It sat cooling on her tray. "You have to speak up," Mia said. "No," Aaliyah replied, eyes distant. "I don't want to relive what I've tried so hard to forget. I don't want to turn myself into a victim just to earn forgiveness. So you'll let others define you through a distorted lens." That night at home, Naomi, Aaliyah's mother, returned from work late. Still in her nurse's uniform, she sat next to her daughter upon seeing her seated in the armchair, TV off, eyes adrift. "Something wrong?" she asked gently. Aaliyah handed her the phone with the email. Naomi read it. Her face turned pale. Then her hands clenched as if she wanted to crush something. "Who the hell?" she gasped. "I'm okay," Aaliyah said softly. "No, you're not. You stayed silent for a whole year in Chicago. You hid your tears, swallowed your fear. You once told me, I don't want anyone to know I was the kid who got hit. And now they're using that to hurt you again." Aaliyah looked up. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm not ashamed of the past anymore. I'm just tired of having to prove that I'm worth believing." Naomi held her daughter's hand. For the first time in years, they both cried. Not out of pain, but because a piece of old memory had just been set free. Tuesday literature class, 10:10 a.m. As the teacher stepped out briefly, Mia suddenly stood up. She walked to the front of the class, gently tapped the desk. "Listen up, that anonymous email from yesterday, it's real. The photo is real, but you all read it like it's gossip. No one asked why a child had to learn martial arts to survive. No one asked why someone had to stay silent when being abused. No one asked anything. You just judged." The classroom was dead silent. And her Mia pointed toward Aaliyah, hasn't said a word, hasn't defended herself, hasn't fought back. She's carrying the weight of a reputation you all were cheering for just 2 weeks ago. Aaliyah froze. Mia had never told her she would say any of this. Mia returned to her seat, saying nothing more. But the surprising part was the whole class erupted into applause. That afternoon, 5:35 p.m., a new post appeared on the school paper's official X page. This time it wasn't written by Mia. Author Aaliyah Brooks. Title: I was the girl who hid under the dinner table. In it, she described a night in Chicago, a night when her stepfather threw a bottle at the wall and then delivered his first slap. She wrote about her mother, a woman who once trembled like a leaf, but eventually picked up a kitchen knife to protect her child. She explained how learning martial arts wasn't about wanting to hurt anyone, but about no longer being the child curled up in the corner, waiting for someone to come save her. At the end of the piece, she wrote, "I don't need applause. I don't need pity. I want only one thing, that people like me, like Haley, like Tim, those who were once targets of silence, never have to bow their heads again." The post reached 100,000 views in just 12 hours. Friday, 7:45 a.m. Edison High was no longer the same. From a place filled with pretense and bowed heads, the hallways now echoed with shy but sincere greetings. Students no longer whispered behind Aaliyah's back. They looked at her differently now, with respect, with gratitude, and many with admiration. After Aaliyah's article was published on the school newspaper site, a wave of personal stories began to spread. Many students who had once stayed silent began writing letters, sending messages, or simply approaching Aaliyah in silence just to nod and smile. A wordless kind of empathy. But beneath that empathy, a new storm was brewing. Homeroom, 8:10 a.m. Ms. Monroe entered the classroom with her usual serious demeanor, but today she held a special announcement in her hand. Next Monday, the school will hold a full school forum on the topics of school safety, violence, and the right to protection. A few students will be invited to speak on behalf of the student body, and Aaliyah Brooks, you are on the top of that list. The class applauded, but Aaliyah sat still. Mia turned to her eyes gleaming, as always. You're going to speak, right? Aaliyah didn't answer right away. Only one image flashed through her mind, the face of Drew Connors, cold, the same face that slapped her in the hallway, and now appearing in public with a casted arm, and the perfect victim role. That afternoon, principal's office. Aaliyah was summoned again, this time to prepare her speech. Principal Monroe sat across from her, hands gently resting on the desk. Voice calm, I know this isn't easy, but you're someone people are listening to now, and I believe if you're willing, the whole school will listen. Aaliyah looked down at her hands, the same hands that once braced against blows in Chicago, that had fought back against Drew in the hallway, that had lifted her mother off the floor the day he left. She exhaled slowly. There's one more thing. Monroe hesitated. Drew's family has requested to attend the forum. Aaliyah froze. Both Drew and his mother will speak as the party affected by the incident. Her mind spun. A part of her wanted to back out, not because she feared Drew, but because she feared she wouldn't be able to keep calm seeing that performance passed off as truth. Weekend. Sensei Sato's dojo. The old wooden floor creaked under Aaliyah's steps. The room smelled of sweat, but it was the only place where she felt completely safe. Sensei Sato, a man well into his 50s, wiped his brow with a towel and approached her. You're hesitating, he said without needing to ask. Aaliyah nodded slightly. I'm afraid I'll say the wrong thing, she admitted. Wrong doesn't come from your words, he replied. It comes from keeping the truth inside until it turns into rage. You didn't defeat Drew with that arm lock. You defeated him with your eyes, the ones that were no longer afraid. Aaliyah pressed her lips together. But what if he pretends again? What if everyone believes him? Then all the more reason for you to speak. Not so that others believe you, but so you never forget who you are. Monday, the day of the school-wide forum. The Edison High Auditorium was packed. Over 800 students, every teacher and administrator were present. Even active parent board members attended. Local media were there too, cameras stationed at the back of the hall. Aaliyah sat in the front row, her uniform neat hair tied up. Her hands were sweating, but her eyes didn't flinch from anyone. The forum began with speeches from Principal Monroe, then teacher representatives, followed by 2 10th grade students who had previously spoken out about bullying. The audience listened in silence. Then, the moment came. The MC announced, "Please welcome Aaliyah Brooks, student of Class 11C, to the stage." Aaliyah stepped onto the platform. The spotlight hit her face. Below, hundreds of eyes turned toward her. And in the second row sat Drew Connors and his mother Claire, legs crossed, expressions meticulously crafted. Aaliyah stood before the microphone. 5 seconds of silence. Then she began, I'm not someone who likes to talk. I'm not good with words, and I'm not a hero. A few murmurs in the crowd, but I was once a child who sat under a dining table covering my ears because I couldn't stand the sound of things breaking. I sat behind a door hearing my mother cry when the doctor asked, "Do you want to call the police?" No one spoke. Then I came here to Edison, thinking I'd get a fresh start, but then a classmate's slap pulled me back to that old feeling that I wasn't worth respect. Her voice didn't shake. On the contrary, it was steady, almost frighteningly so. But this time I didn't run, and I won't run today. Aaliyah paused. She looked directly at Drew. Even if someone tries to turn me into a monster, I know one thing: I wasn't the one who started this. But I will be the one to end it. The applause started. Slowly. Then it grew, louder, until it thundered across the entire auditorium. But the most surprising moment came next. As the MC invited the Connors family representative to the stage, Claire suddenly stood up. grabbed Drew by the arm and left without saying a word. Mia whispered she couldn't handle the truth. Aaliyah watched their backs disappear, and for the first time she didn't feel anger. She felt relieved. That night, at home, Aaliyah opened the bookshelf and took out an old photo herself at age 7, sitting behind her mother, cheeks swollen but smiling wide with a ball in her hand. She placed the photo in a frame right on her desk, not to remember the pain, but to remind herself how far she's come. Tuesday. One day after the school-wide forum, the hallways of Edison High were brighter than usual, not because of the lights, but because the atmosphere had changed. The heavy silence that once filled the school corridors had lifted. The sneaky glances of the past were replaced with soft greetings. A few teachers even nodded at Aaliyah as they passed, as if silently thanking her for saying what they themselves had never dared to say aloud. But Aaliyah didn't feel relief. On the contrary, a storm of mixed emotions stirred within her like standing at a crossroads, where every path led to something larger and scarier. Third period, Student Council Office. Mia practically dragged Aaliyah into the room just before the bell finished ringing. Inside were 3 12th grade students, the student body president and 2 coordination team members. On the table was a thin folder and a handwritten action plan. "We want to propose a new group," said Jake, not the old Jake, but Jake Young, one of the school's top students, a student-led peer mediation and support group. Mia jumped in, like a space where bullied students can go not to the principal or a counselor, but to someone who actually gets it. Aaliyah looked at the plan. Everything was laid out: weekly discussion sessions, peer counseling, conflict mediation, and school-wide campaigns on bullying awareness. "And we want you to be the first coordinator," Jake said, his eyes hopeful. Aaliyah frowned. "Me, who else?" Mia smiled. "You're the reason this idea even exists." Lunch, 12:10 p.m. Aaliyah sat with Mia under a tree near the sports field, holding a lunch tray she hadn't touched. "You don't like being a leader?" Mia asked. Aaliyah nodded. "I've never wanted to be the center of attention." "Never? Then why did you speak up that day?" Aaliyah paused, then answered quietly, "Because if I didn't speak, then what they said would have become the truth. And if the truth gets twisted, people like me will keep getting buried." Mia smiled. "Then you're already a leader. You just haven't accepted it yet." That afternoon, Class 11C, 3:35 p.m., as the dismissal bell rang and Aaliyah was packing up her books, a voice spoke behind her. "You're Aaliyah Brooks, right?" She turned around. A petite, brown-skinned girl with sharp eyes stood at the door. Her cornrow braids were neat, her uniform customized with personal flair, and she carried a quiet confidence. "You are Zuri Bennett. New transfer, just came from New York." Aaliyah nodded politely, about to turn away, when Zuri smiled faintly. "I've heard it all, your story, the clips, the speech, the school newspaper article. Impressive." Aaliyah hesitated. "Thanks." Zuri tilted her head, a subtle challenge in her gaze. "But I wonder, do you really know what it's like to be bullied for 3 years straight, or did you just fight back at the right time?" The question hit Aaliyah like a punch to the chest. Before she could respond, Zuri added with a soft smile, "Don't worry, I'm not here to judge. I just want to know if the school's new anti-bullying symbol understands that not everyone is strong enough to fight back like you did." That night, 9 to 12 p.m., Aaliyah sat on her bedphone beside her eyes, staring at the ceiling. Zuri's words repeated in her mind, "Not everyone is strong enough to fight back like you." And she realized she was right. She had spoken about self-defense, standing up, speaking out. But what about the kids who were still getting hit when no one's watching? The ones who walk into school every day fearing who will throw paper at their back. Next, the ones without training, without a voice, without anyone in their corner. Aaliyah clenched her fist. If she accepted the role of leading the mediation group, she couldn't just represent herself. She would have to represent everyone who had never dared to lift their head. The next morning, student council office Aaliyah tapped the desk gently. Mia and Jake were already waiting. One condition, she said, you'll do it. Mia lit up. Not necessarily, Aaliyah replied firmly. I'll help build the group, but I don't want to be the sole representative. I want a different student to lead each month's discussion. Jake raised an eyebrow. You want to rotate? Yes. I don't want this to become Aaliyah's group. I want it to be a place where anyone who's ever been hurt can be heard. Mia smiled softly and said, You really are the kind of leader we need. A few days later, the first meeting of the True Faces group. The group's name was chosen by Aaliyah. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just true faces, because everyone deserves to be themselves, free from fear. The ground floor activity room was packed with nearly 60 students. A few teachers came too, sitting in the back, not to speak, just to listen. Aaliyah sat off to the side, watching Zuri, who had been chosen to speak first, at Aaliyah's own suggestion. Zuri stepped forward, eyes steady, but hands clenched. Then her voice rang out without a single tremble. I've had to transfer schools 3 times, not because I was failing, but because I'm the daughter of a single poor black mother. I've been called Harlem trash, and I stayed silent for 3 years. The room fell quiet. Zuri looked around, then ended with one sentence. I say this today, not because I've moved on, but because I need to begin. Aaliyah gave a small nod, a certainty rising in her chest. She didn't need to be the only one on the stage. She just needed to build that stage so others could step up. Monday, 9:45 a.m., 11C literature class. Just as Aaliyah opened her book, a message from Mia popped up. Urgent update. Check the group inbox. Big stuff. She quietly scrolled to the True Faces app, the newly formed group's platform for receiving anonymous messages from students. And just like Mia said there, it was a new email titled, I tried telling the teacher, but he told me to stay quiet. Aaliyah read each line, every word, hitting like a punch to the chest. This happened last year. I was verbally bullied in class almost every day. They called me monkey, filthy, trash. I reported it to the homeroom teacher. He only said, don't pay attention. They're just joking. But I can't forget how he looked away during recess when he saw me crying. The teacher's name is Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace. Aaliyah was yanked back to a year ago, her first year at Edison, when everything was unfamiliar, frightening, and quiet. And among all the teachers' faces, there was one who once silently left a carton of milk in her locker, who once said, don't force yourself to smile. Just surviving is enough. When he saw her sitting quietly in the corner, that person was Mr. Wallace. Lunchtime, True Faces group room. The tension was like a tight wire. Mia set her laptop down and looked at Aaliyah. We've got evidence. 3 other emails, different voices all mentioning Mr. Wallace. One even listed a specific date. Zuri crossed her arms, tone sharp. If this is true, it's not just neglect. It's complicity. Jake Young, now the group's vice coordinator, nodded. And if we don't handle this transparently, the group will lose credibility just as it's starting. Aaliyah said nothing. In her mind was Mr. Wallace's face, the man who had once handed her James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time and said, You are not invisible. The fire in you must be preserved, not extinguished. How could someone like that have stayed silent at the sight of tears? That afternoon, Teacher's Lounge, Aaliyah entered, holding printed copies of the letters. Mr. Wallace sat in the back corner, prepping lesson plans. When he saw her, he looked up with the familiar smile. Aaliyah, you're just in time. I was thinking about you this morning, that speech in the auditorium. I need to ask you something, Aaliyah cut in her voice, not cold but firm, about a student who was bullied in your class last year. His smile faltered. 3 students have written to our group, all said they told you, that you knew, but you stayed silent. The air grew heavy. Mr. Wallace sighed, removed his glasses, rubbed his temple. I remember. But you have to understand, the school didn't have the protocols it does now. If I reported it sometimes, I'd get backlash from parents. Aaliyah gripped the papers tighter. But you weren't just anyone. You once told me that one person speaking up is enough to stop a nightmare. Mr. Wallace looked at her pained. I know. And I didn't do that. I was wrong. That night, Aaliyah's living room. Her mother Naomi listened to the story, sitting in stunned silence. You're planning to report this to the administration? She asked. Aaliyah nodded. The group can't choose silence, no matter who's being accused. But what if he gets fired? Her mother said softly. Maybe he truly regrets it. Maybe he's trying to do better. Aaliyah looked at her mother, the same woman who once stayed silent for years in a Chicago apartment. The woman who cried because she couldn't protect her daughter. I don't want to hurt him, Aaliyah said. But if we aren't transparent, the next kid will think adults only help when it's convenient. Wednesday morning, principal's office. Ms. Monroe greeted Aaliyah and Mia with a heavy expression. She had received the report from the group. We will launch an internal investigation, she said, but this is a sensitive issue. If handled poorly, it could make other teachers withdraw rather than learn to listen. Aaliyah nodded. But if we do nothing, students will stop trusting the group, and I don't want to be a symbol of courage if the group itself chooses silence. Ms. Monroe looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Thursday, an official email sent school-wide. The administration is currently reviewing concerns related to the handling of a bullying incident from the 2024-2025 school year. Any student with similar experiences is encouraged to write to the True Faces group or contact the school counseling office directly. The email didn't mention Mr. Wallace by name, but inside the school, everyone knew. That afternoon, a new student came to find Aaliyah. His name was Ezra, 10th grade, the one who sent the very first email. He wore a hoodie, his hand nervously gripping his backpack strap. I just wanted to say thank you for not ignoring it like the other adults. Aaliyah crouched slightly, meeting his eyes with a soft gaze. No one deserves to be ignored, she said, even when the one at fault used to be someone good. Ezra nodded and smiled faintly. That smile, small, shaky, but real, was the very reason Aaliyah knew she had done the right thing. Friday, 8:00 a.m., third floor conference room. A long row of tables arranged in a U-shape. At the center sat the school leadership principal, Monroe Vice Principal Allen, and school counselor Meredith. To the right were 3 students who had sent anonymous letters, but had now chosen to reveal their identities. To the left sat Mr. Wallace, his face somber, hands folded on the table. Aaliyah sat in the back with Mia and a few members of the True Faces group. The air was thick. Everyone in the room could sense this wasn't a normal meeting. This was a space where truth would have to face accountability. 8:07. The session begins. Principal Monroe opened with a voice short but clear. We are here today to listen and to understand, not to assign blame, but to rebuild trust. Counselor Meredith nodded at Ezra, the 10th grader, who had written the first letter. The boy was thin, his eyes still avoiding direct gaze, but his hands no longer trembled. I was called dirty, darky, and stray dog in class for weeks on end. I told Mr. Wallace. He only said, "Don't be so sensitive, Ezra," and I never spoke up again. The soft click of the recording device echoed. Aaliyah looked at Ezra, the boy who had just days ago walked nervously into their group room, now recounting his pain before an entire board. After Ezra came Haley, a girl with messy curls and eyes that once held fear. They snapped my bra strap in the middle of class. I reported it to Mr. Wallace. He forced a smile and said, "Boys at this age are just playful. Don't make a big deal." I believed him, until it kept happening. Aaliyah clenched her fists slightly. Her back felt cold. The last was David, a white gay student, who spoke quietly. They called me gay like it was a curse. They drew mock pictures of me on the board during Mr. Wallace's class. When I asked him, "Why didn't you erase it?" he said, "I didn't see who did it." But he was standing right there. 9:02. All eyes turned to Mr. Wallace. He sat still, face neither flushed nor pale, but something inside him behind his eyes was clearly cracking. Principal Monroe asked directly, "Mr. Wallace, do you have anything you'd like to say?" No one breathed. Mr. Wallace stood. His eyes scanned the room. Then he removed his faculty badge and placed it on the table. His voice was rough. "I won't claim innocence. I won't blame the system. I shouldn't have stayed silent when students came to me. I was wrong. I let fear of backlash from parents overshadow the responsibility of being an educator." The room went quiet. A silence that was not suffocating but heavy, like stone. He continued, "But there's something I hope you understand. It wasn't because I didn't care. It's because I was afraid. Afraid that doing this right thing would label me a troublemaker, that I'd be reassigned, that I'd be isolated among a faculty that had always kept its distance from people like me." He paused briefly. People like me. Black, older, not good at flattering anyone. That raw admission stunned even Mia. 9/11. Aaliyah was invited to speak as the True Faces coordinator. She stepped forward. Every eye turned to her, including Mr. Wallace's, the man who once gave her her first book, the man who had once been her silent anchor when she didn't dare raise her head in Edison's hallways. "I didn't think I'd have to say this," Aaliyah began, "but maybe forgiveness doesn't come after. Maybe it's what we need before so real dialogue can begin." She turned toward Mr. Wallace. "You were the first to tell me I didn't have to pretend to be okay, and the first I hoped wouldn't look away when students were hurting. But today, you faced it, and to me, that matters." Then she turned to the board. "We're not asking anyone to be perfect. We only hope that when someone cries, someone will stop to listen. And if you couldn't do that before, at least be brave enough to admit it, like Mr. Wallace just did." Outcome of the meeting. The administration decided Mr. Wallace would be temporarily suspended for 2 weeks to attend training in bullying response and student protection. After that, he would return not as a homeroom teacher, but as an advisor supporting the True Faces group in the next semester. All students would be invited to participate in an anonymous survey to reflect on their classroom environment. That afternoon, Edison schoolyard, Mr. Wallace sat alone on a bench near the sports field. Aaliyah approached and stood silently for a moment. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "You probably think I don't deserve to stay, do you?" Aaliyah shook her head. "No, I think you need to stay. Because no one understands students like someone who once lost their trust and chose to earn it back." Mr. Wallace sighed. "I just hope Ezra, Haley, and David will be okay." Aaliyah sat down beside him. "I think, as long as they see you truly listening, they've already begun to heal." That night, internal chat group of True Faces Zuri sent a short message. No emoji, no poetic phrasing. Today, Aaliyah didn't have to throw a punch, but still made someone stand. Jake replied with a clapping gif. Mia simply wrote 3 words. "She's ready now." Aaliyah looked at the screen. She didn't reply, but for the first time in many months, her heart felt truly at peace. Saturday, 9:00 a.m., Riverstone Auditorium, Atlanta. For the first time in her life, Aaliyah Brooks stood on a stage this grand. The auditorium was larger than any classroom she had ever known. Bright lights beamed down, but what made her hands tremble were the more than 500 students from high schools across Georgia seated below their eyes, fixed on her, silent, waiting. She was the representative of Edison High and the founder of True Faces, a student-led anti-bullying and healing initiative that had gone viral across school networks. Today, she would deliver the opening speech at the Our Voices conference, where students shared and took action for safer school environments. A year ago, she was a quiet shadow in a hallway, Now she was the voice of hundreds who had once been silent. But just seconds before she stepped up to the microphone, Mia, her companion since day one, ran over face pale. "Ali, there's a man. He asked about you. He said, he's your father." Aaliyah froze. Father, that word had long since become an empty space in her memory. The man had left when she was just 5 after a loud argument she barely remembered. Since then, he vanished from her and her mother's life. No letters, no calls, no trace. She had once assumed he was dead. And now he showed up at the very moment she was about to speak about pain resistance and strength. How cruel that the last wound she had never confronted was tied to the first hand that ever held hers. 9:12. The welcome music ended. The host announced, "Please welcome Aaliyah Brooks, student of Edison High, founder of the True Faces Group, to deliver the opening address." Thunderous applause filled the auditorium. She stepped forward. The spotlight hit her face, and in a flash, she spotted a figure in the last row, a tall black man in a white button-down shirt, hands folded across his chest. His eyes locked on hers, unblinking. It was him. She began. "Hi, everyone. I'm Aaliyah Brooks. And today, I don't stand here because I'm remarkable. I used to be a girl who couldn't speak, couldn't look anyone in the eye, couldn't believe I was worth protecting." The hall fell silent. She continued, voice steadier, "But then I realized sometimes all it takes is one person to stop, turn around and ask, 'Are you okay?' And if that person never existed in your life, then maybe you need to be the first to do it for someone else." A round of applause broke out, but she didn't stop. "And today, I want to talk about something else. Forgiveness." She looked toward the last row, met those eyes. "Someone left me when I needed them most, and I lived my whole childhood angry. But I've learned forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving yourself the chance to be free." Many in the audience didn't understand what she meant, but the man in the last row did. 10:03. Break time. After the speech ended, Aaliyah quietly left the stage, walked through the back hallway, and stepped out into the rear courtyard of the auditorium, a place few wandered. And there he was, the man she hadn't called father in over a decade. He opened his mouth. "Aaliyah." She clenched her hands. The wind blew gently, carrying a few dry leaves across the concrete. "I don't need an apology," she said first. He nodded, eyes welling. "I understand. I'm okay now, because of Mom, because of the people who didn't leave like you did." He took a step forward slowly. "There's no excuse good enough for leaving, only fear and weakness." Aaliyah looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then stay. Don't leave again." He broke into tears, and she, for the first time, let hers fall, not from pain, but because an old door had finally been reopened. A few weeks later, Edison High School. A new notice was pinned up. "True Faces Regional Week. Aaliyah Brooks and the coordination team invite representatives from 20 schools to come together not to showcase achievements, but to speak the truth." In the hallway, students stopped to read. Many signed up immediately. A few teachers even offered to help with logistics. Aaliyah looked at the board, then turned to Mia. "We've created something, haven't we?" Mia grinned. "No, you created something. We just kept the fire going." That afternoon, outside the martial arts studio, Sensei Sato stood waiting. Aaliyah approached holding a small box. "I don't think I need a black belt to prove I'm strong anymore," she said. Sensei Sato smiled warmly. "No, you need it to remember. Real strength is knowing when to fight and when to let go." That night, at home, her mother Naomi was cooking dinner. Aaliyah walked in and hugged her from behind. "I saw him," she said softly. Naomi stopped, slowly turned around, and held her daughter's hand. "And, are you okay?" Aaliyah smiled. For the first time, truly okay. Weekend, the old tree behind the schoolyard, Aaliyah sat alone. In her hands was a blank notebook open to the first page. She wrote, "I was once someone who was silenced. But now I'm someone who creates space for voices. So the story of Aaliyah Brooks has come to an end, from a girl bullied in a parking lot to someone who changed how an entire school sees justice and courage. If this story touched you, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit like and subscribe. It gives us the motivation to keep telling stories like this. Stories of fairness, emotion, and hope. We'll see you in the next journey, where ordinary people can still do extraordinary things simply by refusing to stay silent. While you wait for the next story, I've already picked a few videos I believe you won't want to miss. They're waiting for you right next to this one, wishing you a peaceful day and the courage to always stand on the side of truth.